I often complain about the fact that so many devices now are entirely reliant on a mobile app. And I always think, what happens if the company goes bust, or what happens if they just decide not to support a product anymore? There could be so much you can't do with something you've paid a lot of money for just because the company decides that that's how they're going to do things. But the ability to update firmware is actually quite a big deal, isn't it? And the advantages you get from that are huge. I did a video last year on the EcoFlow PowerStream, and I've done a couple done some on the smart plugs and things like that. Just a few EcoFlow products, and a lot of that was sort of highlighting limitations of those products. But over the last probably 6 to 8 months, they've made quite a few changes. They've released a number of different firmwares. And I really just want to go over some of the changes in the EcoFlow products today. And I'm primarily talking about the products that I own, because obviously I don't have the experience with the other products. So I'm talking really about the Delta Max 2, the Delta Max, the EcoFlow PowerStream, and the EcoFlow smart plugs that go together with that PowerStream sort of home system. Firstly, let's talk about the smart plugs. On the smart plug side, they've introduced their new data visualization format. They changed how that all looks in the app, and it's really tidy. I would prefer not to have to scroll left and right to look at a whole day. It would make sense to me to have a whole day visible in one screen, but you can't complain about the data that you're given in there. It's reliable, it's generally up to date. There can be a bit of lag, but not too bad. And it just looks very current. It looks kind of informative, and it's a nice upgrade on the smart plugs. Secondly, they added EcoFlow Mesh. Now that's still down as a lab feature. And if I'm honest, I haven't actually got that working. I've tried it, and it didn't seem to make any difference at all, and there was certainly no visible indication anywhere that the mesh system was working. So as I understand it, a mesh network means that the devices can talk to each other and can connect to each other so that they can, they're not reliant on your Wi-Fi points, or if you have bad Wi-Fi at one part of the house, doesn't matter because you've got a smart plug there. You might have another smart plug in another room, and those two can connect together. And therefore you can control them in more kind of Wi-Fi problematic areas. But I haven't seen any benefits at all of that. So a bit of an odd one. I can see why it's still in lab features. It's a nice idea, but I think as long as they have a good Wi-Fi connection, then you shouldn't have any problems anyway with the smart plugs. And the other downside of the EcoFlow Mesh is that it disables the Matter protocol, which means that you can no longer use the plugs on, for example, with Alexa to, just say turn this on or turn this off. The third one is hugely improved reliability, and this for me is by far the most important one. I don't know, they just put some random thing in the firmware update notes. They always provide the details of the firmware updates, and they said that they'd got the plugs to disable Bluetooth or something like that when the once everything was connected okay, and actually disabled the Bluetooth chip inside the smart plug so that it didn't interfere with the Wi-Fi as much, or something along those lines. I don't know the exact details because it wasn't 100% clear in the notes. But whatever they've done, the reliability of the plugs has improved enormously. Right, so I'll just try and demonstrate to you how well it works. Let's go into the EcoFlow app and choose this particular plug is kitchen. Where's that? There's kitchen. So it's on at the moment, and let's just give you an idea of how you can see the light at the top here showing it's on. Just give you kind of an idea of how responsive it is now. It's not perfect, but it's good. There you go, and back on. The two main issues I had before were, one, when you tap on the button to kind of turn something on or off on the plug, it just was laggy, sometimes didn't work, wasn't terribly responsive. And the second issue was that the plugs just kept dropping off the network randomly all the time. You'd go into the app and all of a sudden, plug's not available. Well, you've got to repair it via Bluetooth and you've got to re-add it that way, and it just disappears. Doesn't happen anymore. So the plugs are reliably there and very responsive on the on-off buttons. Let's move on to automation. They've added a whole new section onto the app specifically for automation. And I mentioned in the last video that nice to have these smart plugs and stuff, but you can't do anything with them because the automation's so terrible. All you can do is set time of day, and that's about it. Well, they've introduced a whole automation section now, and it's pretty extensive. It's still got work to do there. I think there are certain things that are certain key things that are missing, but you can. They've really started integrating their whole systems together, so you can set conditions of the PowerStream system to change something on the battery which will enable something on the plug or something like that. So they all sort of work together, and that's great for me. For example, I've got a couple of automations set so that if the solar power goes above 50 watts, it switches to supplying power to the house, and then over 250 watts. And then if it goes below 50 again, it switches back. So you can kind of just automate that stuff so you don't end up with a completely sort of flat battery where if you forget to change it back to power storage mode rather than power supply mode. So yeah, you got useful checks that you can do around solar power, battery level of the Delta Max. You can do manual triggers, so you can just have a button to sort of activate 3 plugs at once, which is good because that's kind of like grouping effectively. You can do weather checks as well. They're very rudimentary. It's just severe weather. It just says if severe weather hits. I mean, what's their definition of severe weather, and where are they checking this from? But you can do it. And not something I would really use. And you can change the conditions based on the amount of power being drawn on the smart plugs, and of course the standard time of day stuff still exists as well. But they're huge improvements, really, really big addition to what we had last year when the smart plugs came out, which really was quite laughable as far as automation goes. Okay, let's move on to the PowerStream. Now, the PowerStream is viewed from 2 different perspectives in the EcoFlow app. You have the PowerStream from a hardware perspective, so it's talking about literally what is coming in and going out of that physical device. And then you have the PowerStream from your space perspective, i.e. the home. And then with that, you're talking about home, solar panels, and battery. In the first instance, the PowerStream hardware, they have again added that huge improvement to the data visualization. I contacted them a while back and said, I've got no historical data in the app anymore. It's just completely disappeared. All my solar power from last year, gone. And they wrote back and said, yeah, you'll have to wait for a firmware upgrade until that's fixed. When that firmware upgrade came, they introduced this new visualization into the PowerStream, as well as bringing back all the historical data on the solar stuff. You now have some really good stuff, just sort of day-on-day percentage changes, which can then apply to week-on-week and month-on-month percentage changes of solar power, and each individual bar on the graph can be tapped on to see the exact data for that point in time, and just very nicely presented and a really welcome addition. The solar panels, if you tap on the solar panel icon in the space area, you can now see the voltage and the amps of each individual MPPT controller. And that's really handy to see, just being able to check what it's doing. You can quickly, check if you've got a panel connected. It might not be generating any current because it's, you might not have any decent sunshine, but you can check the panel connection is good because you can see a voltage on it. Feed-in control has been added, and what that does is when the battery's full, it limits the amount that it pushes into the home power to the amount that you have set. So you might have the base load set to 100 watts, and then you've got your smart plug, so it'll just limit it to what it would normally do if the battery wasn't full, as opposed to battery's full, any excess I'm just going to push into the grid, which might be the other choice you want to make. If pushing it into the grid is good for you, if you're going to get money back on that, if it's worthwhile for you to do that, and you have something set up with your supplier to allow you to do that, then that would be beneficial. We now have individual smart plug control in the PowerStream system. That's probably not the best way to describe it, but what that means is you can turn off individual smart plugs that you don't want to be added to the calculated load for your system. So let's say you have a smart plug that is sometimes just like needs so much power because of whatever reason, it would completely swamp the entire system, then you can just disable that one temporarily until it's reduced in power or something like that. But a better example, I think, is, let's say my setup here, I want to have a smart plug attached to my battery so that if the battery drops below 10%, it tops it up. You can do that through the automation. So you could say, yeah, Delta Max 2 battery below 10%, enable this smart plug, turn the smart plug on. But if that smart plug is then also part of the whole PowerStream system as well, then you're going to be draining whatever you're charging the battery with. So you could want to charge, you might want to charge the battery at a kilowatt, and then you're saying, I want to supply a kilowatt from the PowerStream that you're charging up, and you kind of end up in a pointless loop there, completely swamping the PowerStream system, which is limited to 800 watts. Do you get what I mean? There would be no point in doing that, but you still need the smart plug from EcoFlow to have it as part of the automation, and it will automatically get added to the PowerStream system. So being able to just take the check box off that and say, don't calculate all the load of the smart plugs, but just ignore that one for now, because I'm going to be charging my battery with that one. However, the biggest one of all, by far, is the ability now to use both the solar inputs on the PowerStream system and the solar inputs on the Delta batteries as well. Previously, if you connected the solar in on the Delta batteries, it would stop supplying the solar in from the PowerStream into the battery on the Delta Max. So you couldn't do both at the same time. Now you can, and that's a huge change, because what that means is the 800 watts limited power input that you have on the PowerStream system, you can now bump that up with the kilowatt, so 500 watts per port on the Delta Max 2 that I've got in this example. So suddenly my potential power input has bumped from 800 watts up to 1,800 watts. Not only that, you can also charge from AC at the same time as well. So you could, if you wanted to, bump up the power of the battery while still supplying power to the house from another battery, the mains inverter out on another battery, for example, that you might have charged on a previous day or something like that. So there's all sorts of combinations that this allows. But the main thing is you're not tied to that 800 watts anymore. Now, of course, you lose the statistics on the solar, and it's really nice having those. I love those. I love seeing how much power has been generated in a day. And you lose that because, of course, if you're shoving half your panels into the back of the Delta Max 2, that data is not coming into the home system. It's not coming into the PowerStream. It's not being logged against the PowerStream. So you do lose that. Small price to pay, as far as I'm concerned, for the ability to have 4 MPPT controllers all operating at once, 4 PV inputs and potentially a mains input as well. That is by far the biggest change. Now, EcoFlow have said that they're going to enable that on the original Delta Max. From what I read in the notes, it's already enabled on the firmware on the Delta Max 2. I've had it working and it worked great. I haven't tried it on my Delta Max yet, the original Delta Max. They did specify a firmware version that it would be enabled on, but they're not up to that firmware and they haven't released that firmware. So I don't know if that's something they're working on or whether it will ever come to the Delta Max as well as the Delta Max 2. It's a really big addition, and hopefully they will add it to the old products too, rather than kind of forcing people, again, going down that kind of firmware company has control thing, forcing people to upgrade, because this is a kind of deal breaker. It's a really big deal to be able to charge from all that at once, charge the battery from all 4 inputs, because otherwise those other 2 are just going to waste. If you're using the PowerStream with the Delta 2 Max battery, those 2 controllers have just wasted. They're sat there doing nothing. Not anymore. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. They are the main updates on the EcoFlow app and the EcoFlow system. There's probably many more across the range of products they have, but these are the ones that are relevant to the smart plugs, the PowerStream, and the Delta Max batteries. Thanks for watching, and if you've got any questions, let me know. I'll answer them as quick as I can, if I can, and I'll speak to you soon.